All right, so today we're going to be taking a deep dive into kind of a controversial technique used in social psychology research.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the bogus pipeline.
Okay.
And you can think of it kind of like a fake lie detector
Right.
that researchers use to try to get people to answer sensitive questions more honestly.
Yeah.
So you can already see, like right off the bat, we're getting into some ethically murky waters here.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, is it ever okay to deceive someone?
Right.
Even if you think it might lead to, like, valuable insights.
Exactly. And that's the central dilemma that we're going to be kind of grappling with today. And we're going to be looking at this through a 1997 paper by Herman Aguinis and Mitchell Handelsman.
Aguinis.
Aguinis rhymes with beer.
Okay, got it.
From the Journal of Applied Social Psychology.
Okay.
And they really frame this debate as kind of this internal struggle that a lot of researchers face.
Right.
You know, you're weighing these potential benefits of the research against the potential costs of deception.
Yeah. So let's start with, like, the argument for using something like this.
Okay.
Like, why would researchers even consider using deception in the first place?
Well, you know, think about the types of topics that social psychologists study.
Okay.
Things like prejudice, drug use, infidelity.
Okay.
You know, things that people are often hesitant to be truthful about.
Sure. Even in, like, an anonymous survey or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even in anonymous surveys, people might not be totally forthcoming.
Right.
So researchers argue that traditional methods like surveys or interviews might not get at the real attitudes and behaviors that they need to understand.
Like, isn't that kind of a slippery slope?
Sure.
You know, if we say it's okay to lie in order to get, like, better data, where do we draw the line?
I think that's a valid concern.
Right.
And Aguinis and Handelsman acknowledge that in the paper.
Okay.
But they also point out that some researchers take a more utilitarian view, which means they weigh those potential benefits of the research against the potential harm of the deception.
Okay.
So if the knowledge gain could lead to, say, like, more effective drug treatment programs or interventions to reduce prejudice, some would argue that maybe that deception is justified.
I see the logic there, but I'm still not convinced.
Okay.
Like, even if you tell participants afterwards that the lie detector was fake,
Right.
I mean, hasn't the damage already been done at that point? Like, couldn't that erode trust in, like, researchers in general?
Yeah.
And then make people less likely to participate in studies in the future?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
Right.
But it's important to remember this is an ongoing debate within the field.
Sure.
And Aguinis and Handelsman actually point to a study where participants reported being amused by the bogus pipeline when they were debriefed.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So it wasn't necessarily this, like, negative experience for everyone. But other research has shown that even with debriefing, deception can have negative impacts on trust and willingness to participate.
Right, because it feels like we're messing with people's trust in the name of science.
Yeah.
Which feels icky no matter what the results are.
Yeah, it's definitely ethically complex.
Yeah.
But it gets even more interesting, I think, when we look at the specific research questions that the bogus pipeline has been used to address.
Okay.
And one example that Aguinis and Handelsman highlight is smoking cessation research.
Okay, so walk me through that. Like, how would the bogus pipeline play out in a study on smoking?
So researchers might use it to get smokers to admit to how much they actually smoke.
Okay.
Because the assumption is that people tend to underreport their smoking habits in traditional surveys.
Right.
So the idea is that this more accurate data could then help in designing more effective intervention programs.
But what if those programs aren't actually that effective? Or what if the potential benefit to smokers doesn't really outweigh the ethical concerns of, like, deceiving them in the first place?
Those are exactly the questions that Aguinis and Handelsman raise.
Okay.
And they even suggest that if we know, for example, that the bogus pipeline tends to increase self-reported smoking by a certain percentage, maybe we could just adjust regular self-report data accordingly.
Oh, interesting.
And skip the deception altogether.
It's kind of a clever workaround.
Yeah.
But even if we could find, like, statistical solutions like that, doesn't it feel like we're still avoiding the bigger ethical question here?
Yeah.
Like, even if the bogus pipeline gives us accurate data, is it ever right to trick people into revealing information they wouldn't otherwise share?
And that brings us to a completely different ethical perspective, which is the deontological view.
Okay.
And this perspective says there are certain actions that are just wrong, regardless of the outcome.
Sure.
So even if the bogus pipeline generates valuable data, the deception itself might be seen as inherently unethical.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay,
You
so
said that's kind of the,
that's where we are right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
these two different competing kind of perspectives.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's dive into that then.
Okay,
In the next part.
that was good.
So, if this deontological perspective saying deception is just inherently wrong,
Right.
does that like settle the debate then?
Well, not necessarily,
Yeah.
because remember, the APA ethical guidelines for psychologists,
Okay.
those say we have a duty to use valid research methods.
Okay, so that kind of creates a moral obligation to use the best tools available,
Right.
even if they're ethically tricky.
Exactly.
That's what makes this so hard.
Yeah.
It's like we want to be ethical,
Mhm.
but we also want to produce like rigorous research.
Absolutely. And Aquinas and Handelsman talk about that tension in the paper.
Okay.
They even say the BPL is especially pernicious because it prevents people from making free, informed choices. So you're kind of undermining a person's autonomy to get at something you want,
Right.
even if it's for a supposedly good cause.
And we're not just talking about lying about a lie detector here, right? It's the topics that the bogus pipeline is often used to study, like prejudice or like deeply personal beliefs.
Right.
It makes it even more ethically sensitive.
Absolutely.
Like this isn't just about someone's smoking habits.
Yeah.
This is about their like core values and how they see the world.
Exactly. And it brings up some really difficult questions like, do we have an unqualified right to that kind of information?
Right.
Even if it could be used for some greater good.
Right. And like, what does it even mean to respect someone's privacy when we're using these kinds of techniques?
It's a really tough question.
Yeah, it feels like we're going way beyond just like data and statistics now.
Yeah.
It's about how we value individual autonomy
Right.
and the potential harm we might inflict, like in the pursuit of knowledge.
And that brings us to, I think, one of the most thought-provoking points in the paper,
Okay.
which is, what message does using the bogus pipeline send to future generations of psychologists?
Oh, wow.
Like, if we're normalizing deception as a research tool,
Right?
what does that say about the ethical foundations of our field?
That's a big question.
Yeah, it's like we're not just making decisions about one study.
Right.
We're shaping the ethical landscape for an entire generation of researchers.
Yeah, and
That's a huge responsibility.
that's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
Like, if the bogus pipeline is so ethically problematic,
Yeah.
are there other ways to study these sensitive topics?
I mean, that's a great question. And thankfully, researchers are exploring alternative approaches all the time.
Okay.
There's a growing movement toward using more qualitative methods,
Okay.
like in-depth interviews or focus groups.
Okay. And what would be the advantage of using those?
Well, instead of trying to trick people into revealing their true feelings, you're creating a space where they can share their experiences and perspectives in their own words.
So it's more about building trust and rapport
Exactly.
than like exploiting vulnerabilities.
Exactly.
That's
It's
how-
a much more collaborative approach, I think, that acknowledges the complexity of human experience.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And it allows for a much more nuanced understanding of sensitive topics as well.
Okay.
Instead of just getting a yes or no answer,
Right.
you're getting this richer picture of how people think and feel
Yeah.
about these issues.
So it seems like we're moving away from trying to catch people in their true beliefs and moving more toward like an understanding and empathetic approach to research.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
And it's not just about being nice.
Mm-hmm.
These methods can generate incredibly valuable data
Right.
that can then be used to inform interventions and policy decisions.
Sure.
So it's about finding ways to be both rigorous and ethical
Okay.
in our pursuit of knowledge.
This whole conversation is making me rethink what it means to be a good researcher.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting groundbreaking results.
Right.
It's about how we treat the people who participate in our research and the impact we have on the field as a whole.
I think that's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
And Aquinas and Handelsman's paper doesn't give us easy answers,
Right.
but it forces us to confront these essential questions
Yeah.
and to think critically about the choices we make as researchers.
Right.
And I think that's a conversation we need to keep having.
Yeah, it feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really complex issue.
Yeah.
And, it's easy to get caught up in the theoretical arguments.
Right.
But we have to remember these choices have real world consequences.
Absolutely. Like we said before, just because some people said they were amused by it
Right.
doesn't mean it was okay.
Exactly.
Right.
There could be underlying discomfort.
Right.
Or a sense of betrayal even.
Right. And even if, like, the harm to individual participants isn't super obvious, what about the broader impact on public trust in science?
Right, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
if people start to see psych research as manipulative,
Right.
they might not want to participate or even believe the findings.
And that's bad for everybody.
Yeah, that's a dangerous road to go down.
Oh, yeah.
Because science depends on transparency and honesty.
Right, and that's what Aquinas and Handelsman were saying. Like, this sends a bad message to future generations of psychologists.
Absolutely. It normalizes deception.
Right.
And undermines informed consent.
It's like saying the ends justify the means.
Yeah. Which can be really dangerous.
Yeah, so it's this tough balancing act.
Right.
We want to use the best methods to study these important issues, but we can't just throw ethics out the window.
Exactly. That's the core tension here
Yeah.
between getting knowledge
Right.
and protecting people.
This deep dive is making me realize there's no easy answers.
Definitely not.
Like, every research question, every group we work with
Right.
has its own ethical challenges.
Absolutely. And as researchers, it's our job to think about that carefully.
Okay.
You know, weigh the potential benefits and harms.
So their paper doesn't give us like a checklist or anything,
Not exactly.
but it gives us a way to think about these things.
Yeah, a framework for making these decisions.
Right.
It reminds us that ethical research is about more than just following the rules.
Right.
It's about really taking responsibility for our participants.
Right. And for the whole field.
Exactly.
So the big takeaway here, I think, is that using the bogus pipeline is a really big deal.
Not something to be taken lightly.
And you really have to think about
Yeah,
the potential benefits and harms
absolutely.
and try to find other ways to do the research if you can.
Whenever possible.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really thought-provoking deep dive
It has.
into the ethics of the bogus pipeline.
Definitely.
Hopefully everyone listening will keep thinking about these issues.
Yeah, these are important conversations to have.
All right. Well, until next time, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.